Ooh, the Golden Stallion, the man of tomorrow, Sabzu, the rated R radio star, here for that monthly injection that everybody, well, I don't know about everybody, but that a lot of people look forward to. And that is, of course, the Star Wars update that is only available to Sovereign Tech patrons. And, of course, since it is the Star Wars update, I am being joined by none other than Robin Freebeard. Man, how we doing?
Woo! Welcome to the Star Wars Update Devil's Night Edition.
Devil's Night. That's right. October 30th, right? Man. Yeah, Devil's Night. That is my night, baby.
Hail Satan.
Yeah, hail Satan. Absolutely. Oh, man. You know, it's one of the few shows where you can get away with really saying that. it's Sovereign Tech, you know. I mean, hail Satan is just part of it all. Wow. So anyway, we've got a ton to get into this month for the Star Wars update. We'll see how long this show ends up going. You know, I'll tell you, initially, I only thought the show would end up like, yeah, you know, maybe sometimes it'd be 30 minutes to an hour or something like that. And then we end up doing like 2 hours and change. It seems like almost every month. But it's so much fun. And of course, I love hanging out with you, man. So,
oh, yeah, totally.
Hell yeah. But, you know, why don't we go ahead and start getting into it? And I got to tell you, not since, honestly, not since the Fountainhead have I been so excited by a story about architecture. That's saying something, because holy shit, the Darth Vader Star Wars comic book series, volume 2, that's running right now. It's up to issue 22. Hot damn. Like I you know, I can't even remember the last time I read through a comic twice. I used to do that all the time when I was growing up. But like I read through at least the past 3 or 4 issues twice each, because I'm like, oh, this is so great.
Yeah.
You know, because the whole story is, and I guess spoiler alerts, but not really. The whole story is around the building of Vader's castle on Mustafar. And it is fucking brilliant writing. I mean, just and like, you know, there's not a ton of action going on. I mean, there's some action, but like nothing serious. And you know, you wouldn't think that Mustafar would be that exciting of a place or anything outside of, you know, Battle of Heroes in episode 3, but fucking I mean, this is brilliant stuff. I mean, what do you think? What have you thought about the recent storyline going in Darth Vader Volume 2 here?
Oh, I think it's the best thing going in Star Wars right now. I mean, really, it's freaking fantastic. And not only that, it's got a callback to one of Brian and I's personal favorite comics, which was the Lando comic. A certain Sith artifact reappears.
Right. The helmet of was it Darth Momin?
Yes.
His name? Yeah. Sith Lord Momin, Darth Momin, whatever. And that is pretty cool to have that callback. And like the way that, I mean, the Emperor's telling the story, Emperor Palpatine's telling the story about this Darth Momin and like how he was a really unique guy as far as Sith Lords go and everything. And I don't know. And the idea that, again, this is where we are going to get into spoiler territory, but like the idea that the whole concept behind Darth Vader's castle is to try and create this place that can bring Padme back to life and whatever. Holy shit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is high drama, and it's amazing because, again, like there is practically no action whatsoever. We're really just dealing with, to coin the name of a game, the mysteries of the Sith here.
Yeah, you did have a little bit of action at the end of 22 there. When the helmet kind of takes over. Right. Yeah. Oh man, it's so cool. I love it. And also, I mean, I guess this is somewhat of an important matter. This is the first time in canon, in the new canon anyway, that we actually have a female Sith Lord. That being, what was her name? Lady Shah, I think her name is, which is interesting that like she's not Darth Shah, she's Lady Shah. So I don't know if that's going to be kind of nomenclature or not. Well, I mean, the Palpatine did mention that, that at least Momin was kind of a heretic. True. And like the way that his story, because he ends up telling his story to Vader, and he kills his master and he dies in the story. So you would assume that like if they were actual Sith, that would have ended the rule of 2. So they must not have actually been true Sith.
That's a great point to bring up. I wonder about this. Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, in either way, like that was pretty cool to have that character of Lady Shah, even though it's really just a couple of panels, where Momin is telling the story about it. But I dig it. I mean, I've wanted this. Granted, we got it in the old EU a few times. Oh man. I remember. You remember Tales of the Jedi? Remember Exar Kun, Ula Keldroma?
Of course I do. That was one of my favorite comics back in the day.
Same here. I was always waiting for like Nomi Sunrider.
Yes,
just go full dark side, and I was like, that'd be so goddamn hot.
Yeah, I freaking love Ula Keldroma.
Yeah, what a great story, and Mandalorians and everything.
Yeah, and the story between him and his brother and Exar Kun. It was just, and just the whole sort of bizarre triangle friendships.
Yeah.
There,
Yeah, if anyone ever wants a treat and they got some extra Star Wars reading they want to do, there's kind of it's more pretty much a trilogy of graphic novels that were Tales of the Jedi. There's ones that are before that too that have to do with the rise of like a Sith Empire. But
it is to date the only thing that Kevin J. Anderson has had any involvement that I would recommend.
Bravo. Bravo. Yeah. But it is an awesome, just a great story. And it's actually where the idea of a double-bladed lightsaber originally came from. Was from Tales of the Jedi, and Exar Kun has one. Of course, his is blue as compared to Maul's red. I really do think everybody should get used to calling Maul just Maul and not Darth Maul.
Well, it was also the first time that we saw anything about the Old Republic. A lot of people think it started with the Knights of the Old Republic video game, but Tales of the Jedi came before that.
Yeah, way before.
Way before. And it was the popularity of that comic book that I think actually got the video game made.
Right. Yeah. Pretty much guaranteed, because again, it really was wildly popular. So anyway, that Darth Vader series is definitely the top thing going in Star Wars right now, in my opinion. We are going to get into some other things going on with Star Wars. Speaking of the Mandalorians that I mentioned earlier, we are going to talk about the Mandalorian, the TV series, what we know about that. We'll get into that in a little bit. And also, we're going to be doing a review of the first 4 episodes of Star Wars Resistance. But before we get into that, we got a little more comic book news to get into. And I don't know about you, Rob, but I mean, not that I want people to lose their jobs or something, but I was kind of happy about this. Because I have, this is, if Claudia Gray is like the modern Timothy Zahn for the new canon, I feel like Chuck Wendig is the modern Kevin J. Anderson.
That's fair. That's fair.
Because this guy really kind of annoys the fuck out of me. And we've talked about this before. I know he annoys you too.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, Marvel Comics has officially fired Chuck Wendig, who is best known for writing the Aftermath trilogy, which really didn't live up to any hype. I mean, I don't know. It was not a good move to have those be like your series of sequel books that kind of help us bridge the gap between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. So anyway, he has been writing for other for certain Star Wars comics. Did he write the recent Lando one? I'm trying to remember what the hell he did. Or was he writing for not Afra? I can't. He was involved with some of the recent miniseries.
I can't remember which one.
Yeah. So anyway, he pretty much got fired over some, political stuff that he was saying on Twitter.
It wasn't even so much that the political stuff that he was saying. It was the way he was going about it and being just kind of vulgar.
Yeah. More of the attitude.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which I don't even completely disagree with all of his politics, but like I said, he is a big contributor to, the sort of toxicity in Star Wars fandom on like Twitter and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and he's one of those guys that I really think pushes more of that elitist attitude that like Pablo Hidalgo does.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Saying, oh, well, the fans don't matter. We're what matter, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And that's ridiculous.
It is.
Because if no one's going to buy your product, who gives a shit? But it's anyway. So him getting fired, or he was doing the Shadow of Vader series, I think it was.
Okay.
That got announced. That I don't even think that's come out yet, or I'm 100% certain that hasn't come out yet.
Yeah, because I understand it that he was like in the middle of writing on one of these projects when he kind of, got in the axe. So I guess somebody's going to pick that up and finish it for him.
Yeah, which is fine because I have no confidence in his writing whatsoever. Even though I know to some degree he kind of has to pay, like, there, especially with what he did with the Aftermath trilogy, there's certain beats he had to hit,
right?
That from on high, at Lucasfilm. But overall, like, well, I can't stand first person writing. I mean, in comic books it would have been completely different, so maybe I could have stomached what he was putting down, but yeah, I don't really dig the first person perspective kind of books, which is what the Aftermath trilogy
right.
was.
Yeah, and I didn't even finish the last book in that series just because it was so disappointing.
Yeah, it really just wasn't worth it. That's kind of the bottom line on that. So anyway, yeah, so are you pleased as I am that this guy's just like out of the picture?
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't really, in my opinion, doing anything that important anyway, to be honest with you, because I mean,
right.
Aside from what we just talked about with the Vader comic, there's really not that much special going on in Star Wars comics right now anyway.
Yeah.
The only other thing that I would say that I'm enjoying right now is IDW is putting out a short series called Vader's Castle, which is kind of like cute little, like, sort of ghost stories in the Star Wars universe,
right?
And they're fun.
Yeah, it's more of a kiddie thing, but it works.
Yeah, it does. And they're, like I said, they're ghost stories, which are always fun. I mean, you can have fun with those whether you're an adult or a kid.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that most exciting thing going right now is Vader's Castle, no matter what you're reading.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Which, hey, great, and I'll tell you, I really do hope we get Vader's Castle in episode 9. Like, there needs to be more of that.
Yeah.
And I know there's been rumors. I mean, it was supposed to be in The Empire Strikes Back, for fuck's sake.
Right.
But I know there's been rumors that it would be in 9. I'm really hoping that it will be. So anyway, speaking of kind of more kiddie stuff, why don't we shift gears? And that is to, well, I guess what is maybe the main thing going right now in Star Wars. And one of the things keeping it going as far as being on the screen, because we're not going to get, episode 9 until December 20th, 2019. It's going to feel weird to not have a Star Wars movie in December already. For me anyway. I don't know about for you, Rob. I mean, how do you feel about that? Like, I mean, did you already get used to it that there's just a Star Wars movie?
Yeah, I've kind of used to, I mean, like, I kind of feel like we needed a break anyway. So,
oh, sure.
Maybe this is for the best.
Yeah, I think this can get the some of the bad tastes out of the mouth, as it were.
Right.
But running right now is Star Wars Resistance, and this is on Disney proper, I think. Not even on Disney XD. This is just on the Disney Channel.
Yeah.
Which tells you much about really like who its audience is supposed to be. If it was on Disney XD, it could be more of your preteen into teenager realms, and demographics, or into maybe even more of the adult. But because this is just straight Disney, this is definitely for the very younger crowd. But that said, we're 4 episodes deep. There's kind of some weirdness around that I've talked about in recent Sovereign Tech,
right?
Wherever I talked about it, because
kind of preloaded the first 3 episodes.
Yeah, we had to wait 3 weeks to see a new episode.
Yeah, that was kind of annoying.
Yeah, but regardless, we're 4 episodes deep, I guess it's 4. The first episode is 2 episodes put together, so maybe you could say we're 3 episodes.
Yeah, there's been some funny numbering online that I've seen, but it seems like most people have reached a consensus now that the most recent episode is the 4th episode.
Right, which is the High Tower.
Yeah, and they're counting the first, the pilot as just 1 episode instead of 2.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, I, personally, again, it's clearly designed. I mean, like I like the artistry. We've talked about the artistry already.
Yes.
We enjoyed it, and that it's actually kind of beautiful. You can tell that it's meant for a very young crowd. You can tell that it's meant kind of for the 7-year-olds, but for some reason, and we could talk about each episode a little bit, but for me personally, for some reason, I've felt like I can't believe how quickly, I'm into this show. And with the character of Niku, who's voiced by the brilliant Josh Brenner, who's also in the show Silicon Valley. He plays Big Head in that. Like, I think that the character's hilarious. Like, I'm laughing out loud at times. Like, I think it's downright hilarious. There's not, I mean, I guess maybe it's because it doesn't feel like there's so much on the line as to where with Star Wars Rebels, we're like, oh, this is going to deal with the Rebel Alliance. Well, this better be pretty fucking good. With Star Wars Resistance, I don't know, maybe my expectations were low or what, but I'm already like sold in, I'm in, and I'm watching it, and I'm actually looking forward to when it's going to come out. And I'm overall having a very good time. I mean, what's your initial impressions based on these first 4 episodes, Rob?
I don't think I'm into it as much as you are, but that doesn't mean I'm not enjoying it. I do have some nitpicks about the show.
Sure.
But that's really what they are. And just kind of, it's more that I don't have high expectations. I just have hopes for what they're going to do in the future.
Let's break into that.
Yeah. So, I mean, like it definitely is kind of coming off as a slow burn. And I really hope that we don't have to wait an entire season for, Kaz to kind of become maybe, kind of an established pilot on the platform. Because right now he's just, like a mechanic, and not even a good one at that.
Right.
And we know that's not like his destiny.
Yeah, I mean, which is kind of, okay. So, that's when you bring that up quick, I do want to address one nitpick. This is a guy who is flying a T-85 X-Wing in the very first episode. He's part of the New Republic military, whatever. And yet he comes off as kind of a goof. And it's like, well, I don't think you get handed over a T-85, X-Wing and be a goof. So like, I guess that there's a little bit of a problem in the storyline with that. So just bringing that up, but continue, please.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. I don't disagree with that. So the other thing that like kind of like you mentioned the character of Niku, and I agree the character's funny, but my issue with him is that I hope the way I look at it is the character is kind of representing a certain type of person, shall we say, on the spectrum. Yes. And I don't like using that word. It gets used too often as a pejorative, and I hate that.
Right.
But I really hope that the character provides some sort of purpose or utility in the show other than comic relief or to get Kaz in trouble.
Yeah, understood. There is, let's talk about that for a second, because there is one could almost call odd push. And odd as in like it seems out of place. There is an odd push in Hollywood in general, in entertainment in general, to have autistic characters be put on display. There's the recent movie, which pretty much like it's like The Bourne Identity, but it's with of all ironies with Ben Affleck, where he's playing this like autistic character that is a badass and so on. And there's a lot of other shows, it seems like, where they really are injecting, that kind of character. And yeah, I'm of two minds on that, because personally, before this was such a well-known and well-discussed thing, I have a very young nephew who is autistic, and he certainly doesn't operate at the level of, say, like Niku, as to where like conversations work that way and so on.
Right.
It's definitely a sensitive subject. In one sense, it's like, okay, I'm glad that there's some representation of that and so on. But like, I don't know, there's not enough high level conversations happening around.
That's my point, is sometimes there's really not just kind of flattering representations, and not that it always has to be, but there's kind of a trope, and they're kind of leaning into that trope with Niku.
Yeah, an interesting thing, the recent movie Predator, which I did a review of on Sovereign Tech, which I enjoyed the hell out of, that has an autistic boy in it as one of the main characters, who actually kind of saves the day. And in that, they expressly say that they like this biologist, she says no, that boy, like there's nothing wrong with him. He might be our next step in our evolution, which is kind of, like praising autism.
That's cool.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. And that is part of the high level conversation that people are having outside of entertainment, outside of the entertainment industry. And that's not happening. And so I could really see how, like, as much as I find Niku very endearing and funny, at the same time, like that could be seen as, oh, you're picking on his, on this issue with him.
Yeah. And I haven't seen anybody interpret that way. I have some people say that they find the character is annoying, which, I mean, that's a matter of preference. Sure. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I can understand why some people might feel that way. But like I said, it could kind of lead toward some of those certain kind of unflattering, characteristics or representations.
Yeah, I mean, I could see where the character, like, already I can see two things happen with this character at a level of high drama. One is that because Niku seems to be absolutely fearless, like particularly in the episode The High Tower, when he's encountering the First Order, he just walks up and asks them questions,
right,
with no fear whatsoever, and that could lead to a very heroic act,
right?
And that could be cool. Also, it could, because you feel like, I don't know how to put this, because you could feel like, the character is somehow, I don't know, more innocent or something like that. Like there could be a very tragic incident that could happen with the character, which would also lend itself to high drama. So I don't know. I like the character overall, but I definitely get what you're saying as far as that goes. And I'm certainly.
Yeah. And I'm not saying I dislike the character either. I'm just hoping that he'd and then this is kind of like my beat on the whole entire series thus far, is I really hope it doesn't take long for it to grow into itself.
Well, I mean, it really shouldn't, because we're 6 months before The Force Awakens. So you've got to become something within, or like that's the time frame. It takes place 6 months before The Force Awakens. So in pretty short order, this should become a very big deal, because the First Order is going to show just how bad it is,
right,
inside of 6 months.
And that alone is going to lead to some high drama, because Kaz's father is a senator. And we know that what means for him.
That probably means he's on Hosnian Prime.
Yes.
When Starkiller Base blows it up.
Exactly.
Yeah. And also, like, they're definitely, they're playing around the character of Yeager, who I think is also a pretty cool character.
I like him. He's probably my favorite character thus far.
Yeah. And that he has history with Poe Dameron and so on. And so we're probably, Yeager, I think there could be some very dark elements to bring into the show that he could talk about, like, why did he leave after the Battle of Jakku? Because we know he was in the Battle of Jakku.
Right. He's definitely one of those characters you get the impression that he's seen some shit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, what other thoughts do you have on the show? Go for it.
The only other thing that, like, and here again, I realize this is a kid's show, but like some of the animation, and I don't mean the way that it looks visually, I mean the actual animation and the way characters move, it's a little too kiddie-ish. Like, so many times we see characters literally sneaking around on their tippy toes, holding their hands up, kind of like in the T-Rex position, and it's so kind of silly and stupid, and here again, I understand it's a kid's show, but that and some of the animation is really kind of rigid. Yeah,
no, that's true. I can see where at points like the animation doesn't hold up as well when we're dealing with like the racers and any kind of fighter sequence or starfighting sequence or something like that. It's amazing. Like, it really shines there. But character,
that stuff's not hard to do. And I think that really, I understand. I think this show definitely has a smaller budget than Rebels did, and Rebels had a smaller budget than Clone Wars. So I mean, I think eventually, if the show proves itself, maybe they'll get a bigger budget, and these things will improve.
Yeah, I mean, right now, as far as reviews, it has. I mean, Rotten Tomatoes, of course, is more of an aggregator, but it has 91%. I mean,
cool.
It's pretty amazing that it's holding that. I personally, I wouldn't disagree with it. A couple things I want to bring up about it. I don't know that it's necessarily a critique. This oddly feels way too much like Tron Uprising. like the character of Kaz compared to Beck, like even downright to being sort of this like fluky mechanic and everything that's actually like a secret hero. It really smacks of that kind of storyline, which I would not be surprised if they weren't ripping whole cloth some storylines and some scripts that maybe were for future seasons of Tron Uprising, which was a far too short-lived show on Disney XD that I think ended because Disney ended up buying out Star Wars inside of a few months after it aired.
Yeah, it still hurts to talk about that show because it was so good.
Damn right. Yeah, it really was. But that was one that was meant for a little bit higher of a demographic than what Star Wars Resistance is.
Right.
The other thing, and this is a major compliment, at least for me, I have never seen in any other Star Wars content so many allusions and use of characters, alien races, technology, whatever, to Episode 1 in any other, like just in any other medium.
They're running.
Go ahead.
They're running the whole gamut of the entire franchise in terms of like representation of alien characters because I mean, like the bartender, I think is the same race as Unkar Plutt from Force Awakens.
Right. Yes. Yep. Yeah. I mean, and then you have Rhodians, you have Chadrafans.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean, like there's plenty to pick. Yeah. They're really putting in everything, but there's a lot of Episode 1 love in this. I mean, from the pit droids to the styling, of course, granted, that makes sense because, the one thing that most people agree with was really cool in Episode 1 was the pod racing scene. And because this is a show about racing, why wouldn't you allude to, kind of the greatest Star Wars race ever?
Right.
Now
I'm glad you
go ahead.
I'm glad you brought up the Chadrafan because they're a personal favorite race of mine. I'm glad that we got a Chadrafan with a speaking role that wasn't in an audiobook.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's another thing too. Like the voice cast they got for this, they're tremendous. Like everybody, and some big names that you don't realize are, who people who are actually, they're not just voice actors, they're full on actors.
Right.
Like I mentioned, Josh Brenner and some others. I mean, they got some quality people doing work on this that I couldn't be more pleased about. Some of the characters I would have liked to have seen more of the racers by now, but again, we're only 4 episodes in, so
that was going to be my last complaint. Is I really wish we would have been introduced to all the racers by this point, and that's kind of like where I was saying it's kind of been a slow burn as to introducing sort of like the whole racing element of the story because. I think it was just in the most recent episode here was the first time that we got to see the racers, hang out in the tower.
Right.
Where they all, and it was the first time that we saw the TIE fighter pilot guy, the ex-TIE fighter pilot.
Yeah. And the quote unquote Russian woman.
Yeah. No. The guy who has the,
yeah, no, I know what you mean.
Okay. Yeah. No. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I know what you're talking about now.
Yeah. Yeah, not Phazon's that's the I'm trying to think of his name, Griff or whatever.
The Rhodian,
yeah. Griff Halloran is the guy.
Right. And you just see him in the background. He doesn't say anything, but
right. Yeah, but and that's taken a little while. I agree with you. I'd like to see more of that, and I don't know. I get the sense the show's probably going to pick up pretty fast because they don't seem to be spending a whole ton of time on a lot of underlying like history and. I really think they just want to tie this into The Force Awakens and do so very quickly.
Right.
Because otherwise there's no point to putting its time frame as being 6 months before The Force Awakens if it's not meant for that to be a crux of everything that's going to go on. And I forget how many episodes the first season's supposed to be, but I don't think there's supposed to be too many. So they can't really waste much more time. Go ahead.
I want to say 12, but I might be wrong on that.
Yeah, no, I think you might be right. It's somewhere around there. So, but anyway, I did enjoy a lot of the Episode 1 love that's in it. And again, overall, I've really enjoyed the series. I was a little disappointed. I'm like, why do I have to wait 3 weeks for the next episode and so on? I do like. I think Star Wars fits pretty well in that 20 to 30 minute mark of like give me that weekly injection in that time frame.
Yeah.
And it's just like I don't know, it's just a little fix, and I like that a lot.
And I think that most people that were worried that this show wasn't going to feel Star Wars, now it feels Star Wars. They've got it
Yeah, right down to pretty much Cantina, and I mean the whole thing. It definitely feels very Star Wars. I also think it was very smart of them to bring in Phasma very quickly. Just to raise the stakes and to give us more of this character that I think a lot of people really wanted a lot more of. And it's great to have Gwendolyn Christie on board with it as well.
And how about that red TIE fighter pilot?
I know.
So cool.
Yeah, and it was cool to have the red TIE fighter. It's like, that may be one of the first times we ever see that cannon.
Yeah, an evolution of the TIE Interceptor.
Right. Yeah, I thought that was fantastic. And yeah, that whole opening like starfighter sequence, and even that was interesting too, that you find out that those, like, the Republic has T-85s and the Resistance is using like T-70s or T-75s and so on. All of that, I don't know. I like that kind of, when they kind of geek out with some of the numbers and everything. But a lot of those numbers you really didn't know unless you watched what are sort of the companion, shall we say, the companion shows that are on YouTube on the official Star Wars channel to Star Wars Resistance. And there's actually two of them. There's what's called Buckets List and there's Resistance Rewind. And each one goes about a minute or two a pop. A very far cry from what we got with Star Wars Rebels, which was Rebels Recon, which would be hosted by Andy Gutierrez, would have Pablo Hidalgo on all the time, and would generally go about 7 to 10 minutes, depending upon, the majority, what episode we were dealing with. But yeah, I personally very disappointed. Like I'm looking at these shows and I'm like, okay, well, it's a minute. You're giving me this little bit. Oh, what's the deal with Yeager? Oh, what's, what happened in this? Give me all the little details and everything. And while that's interesting, fuck, I miss Rebels Recon. Tell me about it, Rob.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the same way. And not only that, like Buckets List is the only one they're putting on YouTube. You kind of have to really dig to find Resistance Rewind.
True. Yeah, that's a good point.
And that's and Buckets List, there's really no audio at all other than some, just background music and them throwing facts at you. And whereas Resistance Rewind, it's much, much, much shorter than Rebels Recon was, and they don't go near as deep as they did into talking about, the behind the scenes sort of stuff and character background and stuff like that. And you don't have a host at all. I mean, like, I love Andy Gutierrez. She did such a phenomenal job on that show. I mean, she's sorely missed. I know she still works on the Star Wars show, but I mean, obviously she had the time to do both back when Rebels was on. So yeah, that was a huge disappointment on my part. And even if they weren't going to have her back, at least they should have gotten somebody to sort of just, be the host of these after shows or, add-on shows or whatever you want to call them. And there's no personality to it at all.
Yeah. What I find missing about it, especially, is that while at first Rebels, I think for a lot of people felt like it was for too young an audience, or they wanted something more, or maybe they were coming off of, season 5 or the Lost Missions of Clone Wars, and that had gotten to such a really an adult and epic level. You were wanting that with Rebels at first in the first season, I've always felt that Rebels Recon is what hooked in the diehards, what hooked in this, like, okay, you will get into the production. We're going to tell you how we took this from Ralph McQuarrie's artwork. We're going to do, you're going to hear from, from Filoni himself, which everybody loves to hear from Filoni. If anything, we just like to see his cowboy hat. And, we got nothing, there's nothing to, like, just do. If they did some kind of, Resistance Recon, let's say, it would give the older, the older fans something to look into and to sink their teeth into. Because I think Rebels Recon did that for a good while until that show, you get to the season finale of season 2 and then you're like, oh shit, this is for everybody, but before then, like, I kind of understood where people are like, it's too kiddie for me or something like that. So it's a missed opportunity. And I don't know why. I have no clue why they're not doing this. And I really want to hear more, because they talked to the guy who seems to be really the main brain behind Star Wars Resistance. Now it's Josh something. I can't remember his name now, but they interviewed him on the Star Wars show, and he said pretty much everything that you and I, Robin, were talking about in recent Star Wars updates, where he was saying that he's kind of like he has a relationship with Filoni that Filoni had with George Lucas.
Right.
And I was like, yes, it was like, exactly. And because I've been enjoying Resistance so much, I'm like, oh, good. Okay. We're going to get some really passionate, creative directors at Lucasfilm that are up and coming, just like Filoni at one time was up and coming, and now he's God,
Right.
So, yeah.
It's interesting, though, because if you look at the credits at the end of episodes, Filoni still gets like a top billing for writing, though.
Yeah.
They always say, written by Dave Filoni. So, I mean, it's interesting that they've in the marketing, they've distanced themselves from Filoni a bit, but he still seems to have a good deal of involvement in it.
Right. Yeah, no, that's true. So, well, anyway, I mean, do you have anything else to add on with Star Wars Resistance? I mean, are you hopeful? I think you're still.
Yeah, hopeful. No, I am. Like I said, all the criticism I had is just my hopes for how it can improve, and I do think it will. I'm hopeful that it'll improve, and I definitely think there's a lot of potential for this show to turn into something, really good. I don't know if I'm going to love it as much as I did Clone Wars or Rebels, but I certainly have hopes that like I said, it'll grow into its own and become something really, great to add into the Star Wars canon.
Yeah, I think so too. And I like that they're keeping, I think part of what actually sells it to me, just real quick, is like it is on a very small scale, like even smaller than Rebels. Like Rebels was all on Lothal. Like this is literally on the smallest possible scale. You're just like on this like oil rig effectively.
Right.
And so when you keep it small like that, I think it kind of subconsciously or unconsciously lets you know, okay, this doesn't have the broadest ramifications, at least not right now. And so you can just kind of accept it as a little side story in Star Wars, and it works for me. So that was a kind of a very smart move, and I imagine there was a lot of intentionality behind that. But anyway, speaking of something that is not, or most likely not going to be on a very small scale, we got to talk about what's coming up in 2019. We have really, it was just a couple days after we did the last Star Wars update in September 2018. We ended up getting details from Favreau himself about what the first live action and streaming show on Disney's streaming service coming in 2019 for Star Wars is going to be. And that is The Mandalorian. That is the title of the show. Which amazes me alone. But we do have some details that have come out about it. Before we get into those details, I mean, Robin, I want to ask you overall, what you've heard, and there's certainly been other news tidbits that have come throughout the month of October. How are you feeling about this?
Yeah, I'm optimistic. I was surprised too by, the title of the show and what seemed to be is going to be the focus of it. But yeah, I'm glad that they're not focusing like on, like a mainline Star Wars, trilogy character.
Right. This is something new.
Yeah.
So the basic idea is it's this lone gunman, and it is supposed to be a genuinely Mandalorian character, because of course a lot of us thought that Boba Fett and Jango Fett were actually Mandalorians. Of course, we find out no, they're not. They just happen to have the armor, and it's after Return of the Jedi. And we did get one picture from it, and it is a guy in a kind of a more beige or brown armor that, of course, looks very similar to Boba Fett, because that's what Mandalorian armor looks like. And he has a very interesting rifle that looks like something straight out of the holiday special for Star Wars.
And, right.
Yeah. So, which is fine, because that's when we first got Boba Fett. Like it kind of only makes sense. I don't know what I've heard so far. I am wildly intrigued. I've been a fan of the Mandalorians for a while. This is actually going to lead into another story we have for this month. But I've been a fan of kind of like that race, I guess you could say, even though they look very human. For quite some time. And, even before George Lucas kind of changed things with the pacifist aspects of it within the Clone Wars and, Duchess Satine and so on. I got to ask this though, what do you think are the chances that we're going to get Bo-Katan in this, and that we'll actually get, what's her name there?
That would be nice, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me more.
I I have my doubts as to whether, Bo-Katan or much of, the sort of Mandalorians that we saw in Rebels are long for that universe.
Wow.
I it's always been my suspicion that things are not going to go well for the Mandalorians, past, the original trilogy, or even, before the original trilogy, because where we left them off, they were basically in full rebellion.
That's true. Well, I mean, how about Sabine? Do you think we'll get Sabine at all? I mean,
we know
she's alive.
Yeah, we do know she's alive. Yeah. I don't think we get Sabine because she's the way they placed her at the end of Rebels is it seemed like she kind of stayed on Lothal to like look after things.
Yeah, she was kind of a governess.
Yeah. So I don't know, unless they take the show to, Lothal as an actual location, which would be so cool. Yes, please. And, I would love that. But yeah, I don't know that we would necessarily see her as a live action character.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, but it does kind of speak to something that I hope for this show. And that is that a lot of the shows we've gotten so far, Resistance and Rebels included, have not had the scale of Clone Wars. We've talked about this many times, where Clone Wars seemed to do like a Planet of the Week. I mean, we're always going to somewhere new, I really hope that The Mandalorian, because it is about a lone gunman and a singular character, it is a singular character taking on the galaxy, and we get to go to a bunch of planets and not just one.
And that's the other reason why I don't think we'll really see any other Mandalorian characters, is because they really don't want other, Mandalorians sort of stealing his thunder.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes sense. I know a lot of people are saying, and we'll get into it about Boba Fett, will Boba Fett come back in this, blah, blah, blah. But now Dave Filoni is actually directing the very first episode of The Mandalorian, which is probably the most exciting news to come out of this, and the most confident news, or confidence-inducing news to come out of what we know so far with The Mandalorian. I mean, how do you feel about this? Give me a rundown.
Smart move on Disney's part, because the fans have been asking for him to, have some sort of involvement with live action Star Wars for a very long time, and I agree. So this has been a long time coming, and it's nice to see that Disney is listening to the fans to a certain degree.
Yeah, I mean, and interestingly, it wasn't even necessarily, as I understand it, Jon Favreau is the one who said he's directing the first episode. I want him.
Yeah,
which that's a hell of a thing, for that to. I mean, and kudos on Favreau for that. There was a great picture with, that I think will maybe go down in Star Wars history.
For a couple of reasons.
Yeah. Well, if we're talking about the picture of George Lucas on set, and Favreau, and also Filoni was there, not wearing a cowboy hat.
That's the thing I was talking about, is the cowboy hat was gone.
Yeah, he had like a trucker hat on.
Right.
It was weird. It's like, all right, no, this is my live action hat.
I think he was summoning his inner 70s,
But I'm looking at that and I just go, man, like the creative juices in that one picture are just mind-boggling. And I'm kind of hoping that picture is very much almost a sigil of Star Wars really, like healing and growing even more than being perhaps even bigger than it was at the time of The Force Awakens. But healing from a lot of recent things. I really kind of hope that it's that sort of thing, and I'm treating it as such. And even with Resistance doing well, I've been feeling that. I mean, so what you've heard so far with The Mandalorian, I mean, you're feeling hopeful? You think this is going to be rock solid?
I'm excited. I mean, I don't know if this is correct, but like just that one image that they showed of him, it seems like they are very much bringing back and invoking sort of like the old Western aspects of the Star Wars universe, which I love.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Very, very true. Because a lot of, again, Star Wars is an amalgamation of a lot of different types of films, samurai films, Western films, and so on. And so anytime you want to bring in any of those elements and concentrate on one a little more than the other, I think is a brilliant move. Yeah, I'm very hopeful. Everything I've heard about, I don't think Filoni, like, I imagine Filoni had some sleepless nights when he was directing this first episode, and I don't think he's going to let us down. Like no. he just won't let that happen.
Yeah, no.
Right. So, yeah, The Mandalorian, we'll be keeping an eye out for it. I don't know if there's an exact air date that they've put out there yet for it.
I've just heard 2019.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, because I don't even think there's a launch date for the streaming service yet.
No, yeah.
Which
go ahead. And that was interesting. That was something that we I think we skipped on the talk about Resistance, because weren't they really originally talking about using Resistance to launch the new streaming service, or was that something I misheard?
I'm not sure. I think we talked about this last time. I mean, my understanding was it was always meant to go to Disney, but like the Disney channel itself. Because I imagine that needed some kind of ratings prop, but I don't.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know, because I still think it's odd that it's not on Disney XD, even though I get kind of the age group or the age demographics that those two channels differ in. But yeah, I'm not sure on that. But we will be getting. Yeah, again, we don't have a launch date for that streaming service, and of course, there's other challenges with that streaming service that we brought up in previous episodes, particularly that like they can't air the first 7 Star Wars films on it.
Right.
Supposedly, I mean, there's a lot of very interesting issues going as far as that goes. So, but we'll, I'll definitely be jumping on it when it comes out. I will get the streaming service, and well, we'll see what happens. So, yeah, The Mandalorian looks good. I like what I hear so far, and I'm all about a show about the Mandalorians. And the Mandalorians are such a complex race throughout Star Wars history, and they kind of have been, I wouldn't say rewritten, but at least retconned in certain ways to where there's a lot of different aspects to them. We really can't say what this is going to exactly be like just from the title alone, because there's a lot of different types of Mandalorians, it seems.
Well, I didn't even see the stuff from the Clone Wars so much of a retcon. It was just adding on to it, because it's not like they discounted the Mandalorian sort of like warrior past.
Right, with Death Watch.
Yeah. That those elements still exist in there. They just, the societies change and alter throughout time. So it just kind of makes sense that they, could possibly go through a period where they, sort of rejected that and became pacifist.
Sure. Yeah. I think that makes sense. And well, anyway, something that I don't think makes sense, but I kind of get it, is the interesting news that just dropped, I think, like this morning, because I didn't catch it until you told me just before the show, Robin. That is that the Boba Fett movie is, Kathleen Kennedy has come out and said, hey, this thing's dead. Like, it's not going to go further. You got any thoughts on that?
I'm not surprised, because it was never really an officially announced project. Mm-hmm. This was actually supposed to be the first film, if you recall, that Josh Trank was working on before he got the axe.
Right.
And then Rogue One became sort of like, the headline new, a Star Wars story, side movie. And like I said, and while I'm not surprised, and I don't think, in one way, I'm kind of split on this. I feel the same way I do about Solo, in that it probably wouldn't have been a necessary, movie to have, Boba Fett have his own movie. But the one thing that I've always kind of kept in the back of my mind, and a little theory that I've had, is that early on, when Disney bought out Lucasfilm, and they were talking to Kathleen Kennedy about, past projects that were shelved or whatnot, one thing Kathleen Kennedy explicitly said is that, yes, we have plans to do something with what would have been Star Wars 1313. And it's long been my theory that the Boba Fett movie would have essentially been the telling of that story that they were going to tell in 1313.
Okay. Which 1313 is the canceled EA game, or
no,
it wasn't EA. It was LucasArts.
It was LucasArts. Yeah,
and George Lucas had apparently been very involved with it or something. I don't know.
Right, anyway, and it was basically to be sort of like the backstory of Boba Fett, between the Clone Wars and the original trilogy.
Right. Yeah. Myself, I mean, with the Mandalorian being a thing, like, I as soon as I heard that, I kind of knew. I'm like, oh, okay, the Boba Fett movie is not going to happen, because if they're concerned about people being confused just because of whether or not a Star Wars movie has an opening crawl, they're sure as hell going to be confused of whether or not, wait a minute, who's the guy in the armor? Is that Boba Fett that I'm seeing on the streaming service, or is that the guy in the movie theater right now?
Right. And I've already seen some people talking about that, wondering whether or not that was Boba Fett, or whether or not that was the guy who inherited Boba Fett's armor, which I don't think that's the case either.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I'm not surprised that it happened. Personally, I am disappointed, just because, I don't know. I was one of those guys in the 90s. Maybe I was a little too young. I don't know. But I was one of those guys that was totally, Boba Fett was like an internet phenomenon in 96 and 95 and 96. And then there was the whole Greedo. Like, Greedo was the next hot, like, kind of Star Wars character that a million fan sites got made for. But Boba Fett was like the initial one where, like, it was this, this ring of fan sites, over this very minor character. I think people try to, like, downplay, like, the appeal of Boba Fett. In fact, not only that, I love Andy Gutierrez, like you said. I was there had been times in the past year where the Star Wars show was really insulting Boba Fett fandom. And I know that those scripts and what they say generally comes down from on high at Lucasfilm. Right. And so I kind of felt with that this was them kind of saying, okay, get over it. Like, we're not going to do a Boba Fett thing. And that might have more to do with Josh Trank than anything. But regardless, yeah, this doesn't surprise me that it's not going to happen. But I really think it would have been cool. I mean, I think you still have a lot of fans out there who are just like, yeah, Boba Fett's pretty badass. I mean, I was disappointed enough when George Lucas said he's not actually a Mandalorian. But if they went with like a Dread Pirate Roberts kind of aspect to the character of Boba Fett, like, I think really cool things could have been done with that. Because then go ahead.
Yeah, like I said, I'm leaning more towards, like I said, I was really looking forward to them doing that story with 1313. I think that would have been fantastic. I'm really kind of heartbroken that project will probably never see the light of day in any form whatsoever, and that's sad.
Yeah, agreed. Among others, that would be an interesting topic to bring up at some point, is like all the canceled Star Wars games. Like, there's that Darth Maul game that actually looked really cool.
Oh yeah.
There's just shy of a demo for it, really.
Right.
That you could actually play if you wanted. You can see it on YouTube. That would be an interesting thing to get into. So, but yeah, I really think this could have been something cool. And, people forget, because like everybody just says, oh, Boba Fett only had 5 minutes on screen or something. Yeah. But in the 90s, they gave us tons of comic books. He was like a part of everything, and eventually in the novels, he gets to the point where he's like the head of Mandalore. And so, it's not like we didn't have nothing to run on. I mean, they gave us some really cool shit. Twin Engines of Destruction. Right. There was
there were so many great Boba Fett comics back in the day.
Yeah, there were awesome ones. And yeah, the Jaster Muriel stuff was stupid, but whatever. I don't know. There's more to it than just like this cool looking guy on the screen, even though I think personally that's enough. Right. So whatever, we're not getting the movie. Okay. Maybe in the future. I don't know.
Yeah.
So let's move on to some other news here. Actually, while we're talking about shows and movies and things like that, let's talk about, I want to switch it up to talk about what is labeled as a StarWars.com original, which I don't know if that's exactly a new thing to label a video series as, but it is on YouTube. And that is a series called Our Star Wars Stories, kind of a documentary series. The basic idea is that it's looking at like fans of Star Wars. We're about 4 episodes deep with this. The very first one had the guy who created the 501st, which I thought was, well, anyway, I didn't even really know who that was, but Elvin Johnson. They talk about his story and so on. Then there's one where they end up talking to a woman who is a doctor, who she talks about how Star Wars inspired her to become a doctor. There's another one where it's a black woman who is being featured, and she's it's all hosted by this guy named Jordan Hembrow, who I don't know if I was supposed to know who he was beforehand, I don't know who he is. And he honestly seems annoying as fuck to me. Like he's no Andy Gutierrez, that's for sure.
Right.
But anyway, he talks to a black woman who like started sort of this side career of engineering and building her own droids that are, fully mobile and so on, which, that's there. And then the most recent one is with a guy named FJ who is gay. And he is a collector, and he felt, kind of the story that they tell with it, because again, it's like kind of giving like how Star Wars inspired all of these people. He's kind of saying how like the cantina scene like showed him that it was okay to be different and so on. And they even have like his husband comes on and everything. It was interesting. I mean, that aspect, I certainly have nothing negative to say about that. But anyway, how do you feel about these? Right?
Well, I've only seen the first one. So, okay. I mean, I don't have a whole lot of feelings about it in general. I feel like they've kind of done this sort of bit in small doses on the Star Wars show before.
True.
But nothing, this to this level. Right. It definitely feels like a vehicle for Lucasfilm to sort of push their corporate attitude in a way. Like they're
tell me more.
And I hate using this word. These two words, but it's almost in a way that's, Lucasfilm is virtue signaling.
Oh,
and I don't like using those words, but
I know why. Yeah,
it is pretty thick.
Yeah. Based upon, the first four. So the first one is, and actually Albin Johnson, like he's missing a leg, so you have the kind of the ableist aspect or the not ableist aspect, right? And then the next one is a woman doctor. The one after that is a black woman. The one after that is a gay guy.
Yeah.
And I go ahead.
And I get it, and I don't have anything against it, but it is being done in such a corporate way. I don't know any other way to put it.
No, and it's too over the head. Like it's too obvious. It's too. It doesn't come off as authentic. Which, if you're trying to make a show about fandom, you want it to be authentic, and this feels way too calculated.
This feels like Exxon Valdez, We Care commercials. You remember those back in the 80s after the Valdez accident, and Exxon put out all these commercials about how we love the environment so much.
You get an employee hugging a pelican.
Yes.
Like, hey, we care. God damn it.
Right. And that's really what I mean by virtue. So I don't mean it in any sort of depth. I have a problem with representation or diversity or any of these kinds of things. Right. I'm all for that. And I love that the Star Wars fandom is so diverse, but just the way they're going about it.
No, go ahead.
No, go. You go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I feel like I get it. And some of this stuff, like I didn't know the story of I didn't really know the story of the 500 first. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Some of the other parts were but that was the only one that was like super interesting.
And to me, I already knew about that. So, I mean, it really wasn't that interesting. I mean, like I like the 501st. I've thought about joining myself.
Fuck yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I just don't have the funds to buy armor because it's goddamn expensive.
Right. I mean, these run anywhere from 6 to 12 minutes a pop, depending upon who they're having on. And I felt like that was kind of interesting, but otherwise, it felt way too calculated. I'm like, no, the only reason you're talking to this person is because it fits in with your like corporate diversity quota.
Right.
That, that you have to meet to feel good, to like, I don't know, appease whoever the fuck. And it, I don't know. It's, just something about it feels really off, really disingenuous.
Contrived.
I don't like it at all. That's all I can keep saying about it. And also there's parts of it, like I feel bad for Albin Johnson, and I am taking nothing away from what happened to his daughter. Like they talk about how his daughter passed away from cancer.
Right.
And they talk about the droid that he built for her, R2KT. Because her name was Katie.
Right.
And all this, and all of that is absolutely tragic. I will take not a damn thing away from that. But I was a little bothered. Like that kind of set the tone in that, like he talks about how he talked to his daughter who was dying from cancer. And look, I'll be the first person to say, like the classic Russian poet said, Alexander Pushkin, better the dreams that exalt us than 10,000 truths. I fully believe that. But him like saying, well, we talked about death and I used Star Wars as a way to talk about death. And I'm like, no. Yeah, I know the poor girl's dying, but that's where, and then with the rest of this, like, this woman saying, oh, I became a doctor because Star Wars saved me and this, like that. And even the gay guy who, Satan bless him. And I mean that, like, for him to say, well, Star Wars gave me the permission to be different and also, and like, I get all that stuff, but it just, with the corporate attitude that's injected into these little mini documentaries as well, it fucking feels like I'm watching Scientology videos.
Yeah.
It's go ahead.
I mean, and especially the stuff with, I mean, I agree with you with Albin talking about his daughter. And like I said, I don't want to take anything away from that either. I've known about that story for a long time. They talked about it back because the droid KT was actually in the show Clone Wars.
Right, and it was in Rogue One.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was Force Awakens. It's been in a bunch of stuff now. Yeah.
Right, and that stuff predates actually, Lucasfilm being bought by Disney, right. At least with Clone Wars.
Right, which is great.
Yeah. So and again, the guy deserves a lot of praise for sort of the work he's done, and
right.
But here again, it kind of felt like it was less about him and more about what he was representing and what Lucasfilm was pushing.
Yeah. It just, I mean, again, you do what you do, And if that helped if talking about death that way brought that poor girl happiness, like by all fucking means, like go for it.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
The problem is it's being sold to us as, I mean, that's the main, I have a personal problem with that. Cause like I've been in situations where people have died and like someone will try to console the family by saying, well, it was like, in fact, I can give you an exact example. Someone's like, well, it was like this episode of Smallville I watched recently. And I'm like, shut the fuck up. Like that's fiction. Somebody died, you know? And I just, I mean, on a personal level, that gets me wrong, but for Disney, it felt like Disney was using this and it just felt a little too religious, a little too, it was just off. It just all feels very off. This is one of the worst things that Disney has ever done with Star Wars, in my opinion.
It's up there.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I could talk about it forever, but it really, like, it's beautiful to see these people, no doubt about that. I'm not taking anything away from that. I'm just saying that it doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel authentic. And so I don't feel understood as a fan when I watch this.
Like I said, it feels very contrived. And like I said, I feel like I'm watching, We Care commercials.
Yeah.
I don't even know who this is directed at. Like, who is this for?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a great point. Like what Star Wars fan, we all have our stories of where Star Wars is for us. Right. Sure. But
how many Star Wars fans have, stories about how okay. So, I mean, I guess it's not uncommon for people to say that Star Wars changed their life, and that's valid.
Yeah.
But to say that, Star Wars, that whole thing about Star Wars giving me permission to do this or that, you always had that. You didn't need Star Wars to do that, and you don't need to use Star Wars as an excuse to do it now or ever.
Yeah, I mean, I know I want to bring, this is kind of a side tangent, but I want to bring this up. Okay. You're absolutely right. What you just said, you're dead on. I hate to say this as someone's so passionate about Star Wars, but I think it's true. As far as any kind of ethics or morality or anything of any kind of depth that's supposed to be within Star Wars. No, look, I'm sorry. Star Wars is cheap when it comes to any kind of ethics, when it comes to any kind of philosophical message. It's dirt cheap. And in fact, it's not even consistent. I've brought this point up countless times over my entire life, that the real message that Star Wars teaches is that the only way to defeat the bad guy is by giving into hate, because that's the only way that Luke killed Vader. It's the way that Obi-Wan killed, or quote unquote, killed Maul in episode 1. You can go down the list. Like, to really defeat a guy, usually they end up like giving into the dark side somehow. That's how the good guy ends up winning. And it's wildly inconsistent. There's practice. I don't know what the fuck they were trying to say in the oh shit, now the name's escaping me. The very famous trilogy from Clone Wars. With the diamond planet and the brother and the daughter and the father.
Oh, right. Yeah. The ones.
Yeah, right. So for some reason, the name of the planet's is escaping.
Yeah, Mortis.
Mortis, the Mortis trilogy. Thank you. Yes, exactly. I knew it was with an M, but yeah, the Mortis trilogy. Like they're just tossing shit in. Like, I mean, there's no like grand message being said there.
No,
I don't think anyway. So, to like walk away and say, oh, Star Wars did this for me and blah, blah, blah. Like, that's great, and certainly like, I mean, I've had my moments where the pacifist element of Luke Skywalker, and I've said many times, it's my favorite scene in Star Wars when Luke Skywalker takes his lightsaber in Return of the Jedi and fucking tosses it across the room and says, no, I mean, and that was a real toss with some fucking meaning, not like the one in The Last Jedi. Okay. In Return of the Jedi, he tosses it and it means something.
Right.
And he's saying like, I'm not, that this isn't my way, I'm a Jedi like my father before me, etc. Like that can definitely be inspiring from, for a pacifist, I suppose. But at the same time, like, let's just be clear here that there isn't necessarily that depth to Star Wars, not to the likes of something, say, Star Trek or, go down some of the other ones. But, I mean, I think entertainment, go ahead.
Or if there is that kind of depth, they just kind of like skirt the edge of it. They lightly brush up against something and then pull back.
Yeah, and they'll never talk about it in an Our Star Wars Story YouTube clip,
Right.
Come on, because if you're taking a stand on something, there's a chance you're going to lose revenue on all the millions of people that can come and see your movie, right, Disney?
Yeah.
So, yeah, no. So, entertainment, I think, is a genuinely powerful, valid, wonderful, and maybe the most important, because I think as a species, we are storytellers. It's what we do. It's how we transmit information. I think there is a powerful way to share philosophy, to get ideas out there, to change the world, and so on, through the use of entertainment, through the use of fiction. Okay. But look, Star Wars is a great time, but let's be honest about this. I mean, this isn't, it's not Grand Illusions. It's not any of these other ones where they really do have a point. It's sure as fuck. It's not Babylon 5 where you're almost hit over the head with, the concepts of tyranny and all these other things. I mean, like,
right.
Like that's the funny thing. And I think this kind of speaks to the point. In fact, there was a video, I shared it in the Sovereign Tech newsletter not long ago, where like, this woman does this breakdown of fascism in Star Wars. This woman on YouTube, she did a whole video about it. And she's saying, like, it's kind of weird. Disney is pretty much selling you literally for exchange of dollars. Okay. For merchandise and whatever else, they're selling you fascism, with the First Order and so on. But they're really only flirting with it. They're only using the imagery. They're not actually using the philosophy within it, which is what I think makes it possible for people to, like, including myself, to be, say, fans of the Empire and so on, because we're only really kind of using the imagery. There's not so much the philosophy behind it. In fact, up until the Tarkin, or I think it was the Tarkin book, up until the Tarkin book, we had no idea why the hell the Emperor was doing what he was doing. I mean, you didn't know. And with that in mind, as to where, if you take an example like Babylon 5 or something like that, where the bad guys, exactly why they're the bad guys, the ideology they're pushing, the philosophy behind them and so on. You never hear anybody rooting for the Earth Alliance in Babylon 5. Like, it's just not it, because they're the fucking bad guy. And know why. As to where with Star Wars, I mean, it's just, there's great imagery being used, which gives it its illusion of cool. But come on, like, well, and you became a doctor because of Star Wars. I mean, you're killing me.
The only person who's really like willing to talk about those sort of, issues in depth was George Lucas. And it seems like Disney's doing everything it can to distance itself from George these days.
Yeah. I mean, because then, like, here's the thing. If Disney was really interested in talking about how Star Wars inspires change and all of this other things in people, then how about you talk about the message that George was openly trying to put into the prequels? Was, I mean, like, he made direct references to how the United States was selling weapons to Iraq in the 70s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is all about, like, Shadow Wars and all this other stuff. Like, I mean, there are, and that's in George Lucas's mind, even though I would say his execution was, even though I love the prequels, his execution was poor as far as trying to get this out there. he did have some very serious politics in his head of what was being put on display, and very serious allegories.
He had that in the original trilogy too. I mean, he has explicitly said in the past, if you read some of the behind the scenes books and whatnot, is that the original trilogy was made in the shadow of the Vietnam War, and it was originally his intention for it to be an anti-war film essentially.
Yeah, so
he's more subtle about it.
Right. So exactly. So let's get Our Star Wars story on YouTube that has an ex-veteran come on and say, yeah, Star Wars convinced me to fucking leave the military.
Right.
Where's that guy?
Amen. Yeah.
So, you're right. But that's never going to happen because the show's bullshit, or this Our Star Wars story or whatever is BS. And also most people don't actually pick up on those messages whatsoever. We are probably one of a very few set of fans, probably that you could count that wouldn't, I don't imagine it would go beyond the 4 digits that even know that George Lucas had any of that in mind.
Yeah.
So yeah, give me a break, Disney. You're
because people don't fucking read books.
Bingo. There's an amen. Hallelujah. So yeah. Anyway, all right. So I did not expect that to go there, but I think that needed to be said. And I might clip this out and put this on YouTube and say Our Star Wars story, Robin Freebeard and Brian Sovereign. So, and then that'll come up in the search. That'd be perfect. Anyway, but regardless of that, and I will just say I knew all this, and I went into the military, and and I did not leave because of Star Wars. So, even if you knew it, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what it inspires. Mm-hmm. But regardless of that, okay. Why don't we get into, while we're talking about fake fans or fake fandom, let's get into another story here. And I actually have it from the Washington Post, praise Amazon. And no, don't praise Amazon. But this story is coming from Jeff Bezos' pocket change. So here it is. Yeah. So did Russian bots try to bring down Star Wars? After Führer, man who authored study, says not exactly. So the basic, I'm going to say this quickly. The basic gist is that apparently a lot of Twitter bots from Russia or programmed by Russians, which whatever the fuck that means. And I think talk about a boogeyman, where's George Lucas to write the story about that? Basically is the claim is that a lot of the fury and the hatred towards The Last Jedi and the internet backlash was actually just Russian programmed Twitter bots or social media bots in general. That's kind of the basic idea that's going on here. There has been some, by the people that even claimed it, there's been some kind of backstepping on this matter. Mm-hmm. I think that, well, all right, I'm going to read a little bit of the story and then we can kind of talk about it. But I think there's some other things, but I want to hear what you have to say about it first and foremost, Robin. So yeah, I'll read a little bit here. The internet has been aflame, and again, this is from October 3rd, 2018. The internet has been aflame this week over a study suggesting Russian trolls and bots had been deployed as part of a campaign to bring down one of the biggest movies in the Star Wars franchise. Quote, Russian trolls stoked Star Wars The Last Jedi fan outrage, study finds, end quote. Blared Market Watch on Monday night, referring to the 2017 action hit, blah, 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 blah. Quote, there's a bunch of quotes about that. Anyway, the possibility raised in a study by a researcher affiliated with the Center for the Digital Future at the University of Southern California was tantalizing. It called to mind the alleged North Korean hack of Sony Pictures over the comedy The Interview in 2014, a hack that radically altered the movie's release plan. But it turns out Russian bots generated no notable activity around The Last Jedi. Generated no notable activity around The Last Jedi. The box office was certainly not affected by any online activity, and even the negative tweets were just as likely to come from real fans who happen to dislike the movie artistically as from alt-right figures looking to target its alleged politics. How do we know this? The author of the study says so. Quote, I really tried to be very careful in how I frame this. There's no evidence Russians did anything unusual or meaningful. Morton Bay, who authored the paper, told the Post in an interview. So bottom line being is that these headlines, and most people, as you and I know, Rob, like we were just saying, nobody reads books anymore. Well, they don't even read news articles. They read headlines if they even get that far, And the bottom line is that apparently this whole Russian bot thing is by the guy that did the study itself that all those headlines were based upon, is saying no, that's not exactly what happened here. Right. I really feel like, and I mentioned how Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. Let's be pretty clear that whether it's explicit or whether it's through advertising dollars or something else, Disney holds a whole shit ton of sway on a lot of the news industry. They do own ABC, who had one of the largest news organizations throughout the 20th century. And I'm not going to get too conspiratorial, but I can't help but feel like this was certainly used in some form or fashion as marketing for Star Wars. In marketing in a positive way to try and like say, oh no, actually The Last Jedi didn't suck. It was the fucking Russians. And I can't believe that. I mean, it's bad enough when we blame everything that happens in American politics on the Russians again, as if it's the 1980s all over again. It's bad enough that we have to deal with that. Okay. Because really, I thought Rocky Balboa did the 1-2 punch that took care of all that horseshit in Rocky 4, but I guess it didn't happen. But now it's not only that. Now we're not just blaming politics on the Russians. We're blaming box office numbers on the Russians, and how people can't see that this is so much horseshit and so denouncing by, in my opinion, sorry, I wanted you to go first. So I'm going to stop there and I'm going to let you rock this one.
Well, yeah,
I mean, your point might be the same. Go ahead.
Yeah. We're not far apart on this all. If there's a psyop going on here, it's not by Russia. It's by the people who are making these headlines.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And what's really sad about it is the number of people that just have bought it hook, line, and sinker. They fell for it just whole cloth, and it's fueled a lot of just ugly shit on Twitter and social media, people accusing each other of being bots. I mean, you people are, I'm sorry, excuse me, you people are so fucking stupid.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, call it straight. I mean, and I'll say quick, like this is, I think Disney totally used, like, this is insulting. Disney should have came out in front of this and said, but you fans that really have a problem with The Last Jedi, we respect you and we respect your opinions, because otherwise it just feels like you're shitting on all those fans who have genuine gripes, very legit gripes over that film. This is crap. Keep going. What more do you got?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's just, and they'll never do that though. They'll never, and I think that just goes to your point about it. Maybe it didn't start out as a marketing ploy, but they certainly probably took full advantage of it.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, folks, just stop blaming the Russians for fucking everything. Like, and I can't believe I'm talking about this on the Star Wars update.
Right.
It's mind boggling to me.
I mean, it is. And I didn't even we have to talk about it because this is the Star Wars update, but it's one of these things. I don't even want you to give it any credence by talking about it. It is just such a shit, phenomenon, for whatever you want to call it. It is. It's crap.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it certainly speaks to, I mean, in so many ways, it speaks to a major message that I put out on Sovereign Tech all the time, is that humanity is just not ready for the level of technology that it has, because this is a thing, which it just shouldn't be. And oh man, I don't know. There's a lot of themes throughout Sovereign Tech that could really like be attributed to this or played upon with this. But bottom line being, this is ridiculous, and again, it does feel like that it just shat upon, all those fans who, I mean, and there's fans that are just fucking hateful and fuck them, like the people that go after Kelly Marie Tran and Kathleen Kennedy and so on, fuck you.
Right.
But,
and those people do exist, contrary to,
that's not just Russians either.
What you may think of what we're saying here is that this whole Russian thing is fake, to say that, other, ugly aspects of the Star Wars fandom don't exist. No, they do. Those people do exist. They're out there. Yeah. They're a very small minority. I do think the way that they're portrayed by, the media and other people, their numbers seem much bigger than they really are.
Right.
But
nature of the internet.
Yeah.
No, that's really it. So anyway, just bringing it out there. I mean, and it's just, it's crazy. I mean, a movie can be shitty. It doesn't need the Russians to shit on it, right. It's just how it is. And I'm not saying The Last Jedi is that shitty. But well, I'll say this again. As far as like my actual feelings on The Last Jedi, and I know most of us kind of go on a roller coaster about how we feel about it. I mean, I'm really holding in my breath for what Episode 9 delivers upon as to my final judgment on Episode 8. On The Last Jedi, how exactly I feel about that.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm pretty much in the same boat.
Yeah. So anyway, I think we can jump off of that little bit of story there. Speaking of The Last Jedi, though, I do want to talk about this story briefly. I actually just have to pull it up quickly. Usually I have all these links up and ready, but boy, I've been having some weird computer issues lately. But this has to do with what some are saying are incendiary comments. Not that this is unheard of for Mark Hamill, but coming from Mark Hamill about what exactly happened at Luke's death. Like what was the score there? And I think it was on Instagram mainly where he put this out. But he put out a Instagram or tweet. I guess it was a tweet. Looks like it was more of a tweet. But I think I saw it on Instagram. Said, the Force killed Luke. This is Mark Hamill talking. The Force killed Luke. You have to acknowledge the irony in his fate, almost like an addict that kicked his habit cold turkey, remained clean for decades, only to reuse it just once and then tragically overdoses. Hashtag sad Skywalker, hashtag Force fatality, hashtag Jedi junkie. And then he uses some pictures from the last pages of the comic book adaptation of The Last Jedi. How do you feel about this, Robin?
I have a different take, actually. We might go a little bit more depth on this than you thought.
Oh, hey. All right. Rock and roll.
I think this is shades of George Lucas spilling the beans to Mark Hamill of what his idea of the sequel trilogy would have been.
Oh. Now, did we ever talk about everything that...
I don't think so. So if you want to, let's go ahead and get into what George Lucas talked to James Cameron about in his book. What was the name of that book?
I don't recall.
Anyway, but anyways, James Cameron ended up doing an interview with George Lucas, and they were just talking about, the history of science fiction and movies.
Yeah, there was the How Science Fiction Changed the World, which is
right.
Like
yeah,
a TV
in fact, I think
series.
that was the name of the book. Was The Story of Science Fiction.
Okay, yeah, and I know there was an adjoining TV series where he interviewed lots of people, not just George Lucas.
Right.
But yeah, anyway, yeah, go ahead. Okay.
And so in this interview, George actually ends up dropping some really big hints about what he had in mind for his Star Wars trilogy. And
yeah. Now there's some talk about like that the midichlorians were.
I actually have the quote here. If you would
go for it. Yeah, please. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So this is George Lucas speaking. Is the next 3 Star Wars films, we're going to get into the microbiotic world, but this is a world of creatures that operate differently than we do. I call them the Wills, and the Wills are the ones who actually control the universe. They feed off the Force. Back in the day, I used to say that ultimately what this means is that we are just cars, vehicles for the Wills to travel around in, and that we are vessels for them, and the conduit is the midichlorians. The midichlorians are the ones that communicate with the Wills, and the Wills, in a general sense, they are the Force.
Wow. Yeah. So real quick on that. Yeah. I don't think we ever talked about this. But that was kind of where he was going to go with that. And wasn't he going to kill Luke? Like, isn't that kind of a basic idea?
So there's a theory that hasn't been spread around too much, but I think it has a good deal of credit. So in that quote, George Lucas says something. He says that the Wills feed off the Force, but they are the Force. And at surface, value, that might seem contradictory unless you interpret the Wills of beings having sort of a parasitic relationship with human beings.
Okay.
Or not just human beings, but, beings in the Star Wars universe.
Okay.
And I think, this theory has some credit in that Luke was eventually going to essentially discover the Wills and their relationship to the Force and their relationship to the Jedi and the Sith. And that essentially that the Wills were the ones that were fueling this conflict between the Sith and the Jedi, because essentially we're food for them. This conflict was food for the Wills, and that eventually Luke was going to get to the point where he was going to basically reject that and fight against the Wills. And the reason that Disney didn't go with George Lucas' stories is because it would have given a ton of closure. It would have basically stopped the Star Wars story, because if Luke defeated the Wills, that ends the Force, and there's no more Force in the Star Wars universe.
But you see, that would have been so cool, because then now first off, like, so in the promotional materials in the 70s on posters and everything, it was like the phrase "the history of our future" was often used for Star Wars. Okay?
Right. That was going to be the other point, is that the opening line of Star Wars is, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Right.
The Star Wars story takes place in our universe.
Right.
That's not me saying that Star Wars is real. No, that's just George Lucas placed the Star Wars universe in our universe.
Yeah.
Not the same galaxy, but the same universe.
But this would have been so cool for it to explain, okay, well, how come there aren't any more Force users?
Right.
And that's why, not that it's the history of our future, but that it was our actual history, that would have been brilliant. And then hell, fucking rip off whole cloth Battlestar Galactica and have all the people come from, that other galaxy. And then, Rian Johnson already ripped off a ton from the new BSG. So why not, and have them land on Earth or something. This does fit in. We're kind of getting off topic, but I want to hear how this relates to your theory about Luke is a Jedi junkie. Okay. But Tim Laban, well, he wrote the novel, but there was the comic series as well, which was Dawn of the Jedi. This was one of the last comic series and novels done before Disney bought out Star Wars. I loved it, but my main problem with it was because it was supposed to be telling you how the Jedi started, and really how the Jedi and the Sith started. My problem is that actually in the first pages of the comic books, it doesn't give you any answers at all. It just says, oh, these like weird looking ships picked up people from all these different planets and dropped them off on this one planet. And you end up with like this organization called the Jedi, and not Jedi. And now I'm starting to wonder if that was actually stuff sprinkled from Lucas, where like those ships were something of the Wills. And like they were, and they were setting up a human zoo effectively. That opens up some really wild shit. Yeah. That's crazy. Okay.
I think where this comes back to what Mark was putting out there, it's really kind of like the first, suggestion that the relationship between the Jedi and the Force is not an altruistic one that has gotten any traction.
Right. So you like what Mark said?
Yeah. I think it's being misinterpreted the way people are, kind of pushing it. And
yeah, I think his use of like junkie and drugs and so on, or alcohol, that's what gives a lot of the bad taste. I think maybe that's just sort of, it's pretty obvious that Mark Hamill was not pleased with what they ended up doing with Luke's character. Mm-hmm. And
like I said, I think this is kind of like Mark Hamill kind of telegraphing that he would have much preferred George Lucas's story to have been told.
Yeah. And certainly, we talk about like Chuck Wendig getting fired for stuff that he puts out on Twitter or whatever. Like you can't fire Mark Hamill. Like he is Star Wars. Sorry, as much as George Lucas is or someone else. Good luck saying, because of Mark Hamill's tweets. Sorry, he's not going to be in episode 9. Okay. There aren't going to be any Russian bots, but you're going to have people parachuting in like Red Dawn, at the offices of Disney if you did that. So anyway, but when I read this, I was like, well, that's actually kind of interesting. That's a very different way of looking at that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I guess I don't have a whole ton to say about it, because it's, again, for so many things, I'm waiting on episode 9 to make sense of whatever the Disney Star Wars universe, not what they're trying to do, but what the Disney Star Wars universe is going to end up saying. I'm really, really waiting on that, because, we don't know how things are going to work with Force Ghosts, because we know Mark's going to be in episode 9. There's too many questions right now.
And I'll be honest with you, I don't have high hopes for them to be answering a lot of questions in episode 9. Because it seems like Disney's whole purpose is just to keep this machine running and making money for as long as they can. So, we're not going to get, any sort of answers or closures like we would have gotten with George.
Yeah. No, you're probably right about that. I mean, just as long as it can even just make sense of, of The Last Jedi. Like I would be happy. Just try and make some sense out of it. Try and repair some of the oddities with that.
Right.
Because again, until episode 9 comes out, I don't know what things in The Last Jedi mean. Like I can't know, and yeah, anyway. So it's the kind of stuff, when Obi-Wan Kenobi sits on a log and he's a ghost, it's like, wait a minute. But you just go, okay, well, that's how it is. And, Alec Guinness was tired and, what are you going to do? So, but, so I don't have, that's very interesting what you brought up. And I'm glad you brought that up because I don't think we ever talked about that with where George Lucas was going to go with this, and that this is kind of pointing at that. And maybe this is a nice way for Mark Hamill to get his jab back at how he didn't like what was done with this character. Absolutely. Right. I think that's a good read. I like that. All right. So why don't we, you know what? It's a lot of Star Wars we've been dealing with right now. A lot of Star Wars. And of course, Star Wars updates, what we do. But, and I'm surrounded by it here in the BDSM studios, even though not everybody can see it. But why don't we switch things up? I want to do a little bonus that's not about Star Wars, not exactly about Star Wars, even though I'm really disappointed that Masters of Terrascasi isn't on here. But I want to switch things up for a minute, and then we'll get back into some more Star Wars. We'll get into our fan production of the month, and we'll get into our question of the month that we do. But, Robin, you came on the live hangout for the Patreon only live hangout for Sovereign Tech for October 2018, just a few days before this is released. And we started having a conversation, or I kind of started a conversation, but then you came on and we took it in other directions of the retro consoles, video game consoles that are all the rage right now. And we got around to the PlayStation Classic, which that day, we did not know what the full list of games would be that were going to come out. We knew it'd be 20 games. We didn't know what 20 games would be coming out on the PlayStation Classic, which I think now is releasing December 3rd. Originally it was the 1st, but now I think it's December 3rd. I already have it pre-ordered. Though the day after we did that live hangout, we did get the full 20 game list for the PlayStation Classic for this retro console. And I am questioning my pre-order. Like I'm really, really debating just how much I actually want this thing. We'll break down the actual list of games, but I want an abstract comment from you, Robin, first and foremost, with the PlayStation Classic and the list of games. So this is a little bonus game talk here, folks. What was your first impression when you read the list of 20 games that they're making available?
Bummer.
So kindly put. Yeah, bummer.
I mean, I said it on the live hangout. If this list didn't at least include Symphony of the Night, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, I wasn't going to get it because I can play all these games on my on various emulators and whatnot of my own. So
yeah, when I read it that morning, like it was just when I woke up that Kotaku, I think I read it from, put out the story. And I was like, well, they fucked up, like I just said, and Stephanie's like, who fucked up? Because it was, I mean, it's piss poor, frankly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I understand the list.
Yeah.
I
right.
think it's got mass appeal. So I think it'll be a successful product, but for people like you and me, this is not for you and me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the purpose of these retro consoles isn't necessarily to introduce a new generation to something. Yeah. It's to allow people a previous generation to relive prior glories, right. That's the selling point, because you're not getting if somebody's never played Super Mario, the original Super Mario Brothers or Super Mario Brothers 2 or 3 or something like that, they're not going to line up in front of Best Buy to buy these fucking things. That's not that kind of person. The person that's going to get you your day one sales are, again, like I said, the previous generation that wants to relive past glories. And this is a terrible list for that generation.
Yeah, there's some real stinkers here.
Yeah, I'll go down. I'm going to go down the list. We can go by one. How about this? We'll go line by line. We'll go one by one, 20 games, and just give me like a 1-word abstract and just say good or bad. And then I'll do the same as well. But all right, let's start it off. Battle Arena Toshinden. What do you say?
I don't like fighting games.
Okay. I'll say good. Like that. When I saw that first, I was like, oh, okay. Well, that's a good start.
Yeah. No, I understand. I get it, but that's just not my genre.
Yeah, sure. All right. Next one. Cool Borders 2.
Never heard of it.
Right. Yeah. Same here. Like what you have SSX tricky and you're going to bother people with Cool Borders 2. Okay. Sorry. I'm going more than an abstract. But yeah, bad. Destruction Derby.
Give me Carmageddon.
You're right. Yeah. Well said. Yeah. Bad choice. Again, consider there's only 20 games here. So each one of these games that we think is a stinker, you could have put gold in there. Okay. So that's why it's important to break that down. Final Fantasy VII.
No duh.
Yeah. Obvious. It's the Mario Brothers of PlayStation. Like there's no reason why you wouldn't. Grand Theft Auto.
The first 2 games weren't that great. Why is it here?
Yeah, they're different. I like them, and it's a question if they're gonna, because there's also the London missions that were in the first one.
Yeah, they weren't but they weren't that popular either. Like
at the time, they were PC games pretty much.
Yeah, Grand Theft Auto didn't get popular until 3.
Exactly, which was PlayStation 2.
Right.
And I don't think actually it wasn't until years later that it even came out on PC, which is really where Grand Theft Auto started anyway. Yeah, so a good game, but a very odd choice to have here, though maybe a sign in portents of what's to come in the future. Intelligent Cube.
What the fuck is that?
That's what I said. I think I know what it is, but I only remember the commercial of it. Let's see. Okay, then Jumping Flash. I know. Yeah, right. There's no words. I don't even know what the hell that is. And I'm a veritable gaming historian. I have no fucking idea what that is. Metal Gear Solid. Yeah,
I mean, I know people love the game, so that's another no duh, like Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah, exactly. I want to make a comment about Metal Gear Solid 2 as far as that goes, but I'll save that for after we go down the list. But I do know someone who, great supporter of the show, he said he wouldn't buy this if this wasn't on there.
Right. So, and I'm glad for him.
Right on. Yeah. I mean, this is an important one. Mr. Driller.
Sounds like a porno.
Yeah. Now here's the real porno. Oddworld, Abe's Odyssey.
Now this is a good inclusion.
Yeah, that's actually a great game. That's really kind of a cult classic for PlayStation and a great series overall. Big fan. So okay, Rayman.
Yeah, that's kind of another. That's a good inclusion. Yeah,
that makes sense. Resident Evil Director's Cut.
No duh.
Yeah. Though I think it really should have been Resident Evil 2. Revelations Persona.
I've heard of it. I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, I mean, including the Persona series in some way, I think is a smart move because it's popular, but then it's not as popular and it's kind of culty. So this is one I don't mind, even though most people have no idea, and I totally understand why. Ridge Racer Type 4.
They had to recruit a racing game of some kind.
Yeah, and Ridge Racer was a fine one. In the 90s, yeah. Ridge Racer was the deal. I don't want to start talking about what should be there, but I think people will be surprised by what's not. So next one, Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo.
Huh?
Like a popular game, but
you know what? You know what? When I first saw the list, I initially misread that as Street Fighter 2.
Yeah, right.
Which would have been like, hey, where's that?
Yeah, which I think, I don't even know. So Street Fighter Alpha, the Alpha series was on the original PlayStation. I don't know that even Street Fighter 2 was necessarily a part of it, but yeah, I hear you.
Yeah,
exactly. Next one, Siphon Filter.
Yeah, it's a good game.
Yep, agreed. This is another one of those popular series at the time. Tekken 3.
Yeah, I know that's. I know people that like those games like Tekken, so it's not a bad inclusion.
Yeah, I still think it's the best Tekken game ever made. I think that not putting it in there would have been tantamount to not having a Mario game, on a Nintendo console. So Tekken 3 was very important, almost as important as Final Fantasy 7, in my opinion. Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six.
I don't get it, to be honest with you, because to me, this was not popular as a PlayStation game. It was popular as a PC game.
Right. Yes, because of the multiplayer. Yeah. Yep, I agree. And not even a great game anyway.
Yeah.
So Twisted Metal.
Now that's a good game.
Yeah, that needed to be there.
Yeah.
Definitely. That's right up there with Final Fantasy and Tekken. Wild Arms.
Okay.
Yeah, great game in my opinion, but I get it. So that's the list, folks. And like I think maybe 5 of those we said good or great.
Right.
Out of that bunch, and that is not okay, And to say nothing of the fact that a lot of these are like some of these, the Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six, that's still a very popular series to this day. You can look at a few of these that have like future entries, Grand Theft Auto and so on, that are really, really popular and some of the greatest games ever made. Perhaps I wouldn't go ahead.
And that seems the thing too, is it seems like they're including games that were popular in retrospect but weren't necessarily known for being on the PlayStation originally.
Right. They were more like PlayStation 2, hotness or something.
Yeah, like or PC hotness.
Yeah. And here's the thing is that even if you were trying to do a nostalgia play and say, well, why don't you play the first game in the series that you love to this day?
Mm-hmm.
You pick that up, you're going to be like, this looks like shit. Mm-hmm. Like I remember how Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six looks like. Today you can't even tell who you're shooting. I mean, like it's just bad.
Well, did you see the trailer for the launch of
yes.
Yeah. And it looks, I mean, like I said, we talked about this before. They're coming into the 3D area. It doesn't translate well to the modern era.
It doesn't have the charm that the 8-bit and 16-bit graphics have.
Like I said, the only way this would look good is if you were playing it on a CRT, which this is not intended to connect to.
No, right. And look, even if you hook up a PlayStation 2 with RCA cables to this day to a modern TV, it looks like crap. And even when you do HDMI upscaling, it's still pretty.
And that's what this looks like. It just looks like a PlayStation hooked up to a modern TV.
Yeah,
it doesn't look that great.
Yeah, this is I'm probably still going to get it almost out of a completionist move.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot recommend this for anyone. You are far better spending your money on buying an old PlayStation 2, putting free McBoot on a memory card, so that it's soft modded, and like actually buying the games that you love or downloading them and playing them off of a hard drive or something. And because it's perfect emulation by Sony themselves if you do it that way. And I'm sure this will be perfect emulation as well, but to be limited to 20 games, and these are the 20, this is bullshit. No Wipeout, no Gran Turismo. You can go down the list of games that should have. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about with like why not Gran Turismo? Why Ridge Racer 4? I mean, I'm not saying Ridge Racer is a bad series or it's a bad game, but there were just much better choices.
Yeah, or replace Destruction Derby. Put Gran Turismo there or something. Now, admittedly, and this is a comment that's come up ever since this was announced, and we saw somewhat of a model of it. They are using the original PlayStation controllers, which does limit what games can be played on it. Okay. Because if you don't have the thumbsticks, if you don't have the analog sticks at the thumbs, which wouldn't come until a couple of years into the PlayStation 1's life, there's a lot of games that can't be played. And in fact, I think maybe Metal Gear Solid 2 is one of those, and that's why they didn't go with Metal Gear Solid 2, because Metal Gear Solid 2 and Metal Gear Solid, like those are quantum leaps as far as games go.
Right.
Like 2 is significantly better than 1, even though 1 is still great. Go ahead.
I didn't even know that about the controllers. I don't know how I overlooked that, but that's a weird choice to do that.
Yeah, there's no reason to, well, I'll tell you, the only reason that you would want to do that is if you are going, you're going to come out with another PlayStation classic that will have a lot of the games that maybe we mentioned, because like, you know what would have been the easiest thing in the world? You put 4 Final Fantasy games on this thing, and you'll easily get people to spend $100 on it. You put Final Fantasy 8, you put 9 on there. I don't know, put Chrono Cross, whatever. You put those on there, and that would have done it on its own. That's all you would have even had to announce. Nobody would have cared about anything else.
And we talked about this before. Just that the marketing on this whole thing has been weird all through. The fact that they're using in the marketing language is that these 20 games are, quote, preloaded. Now, using that word preloaded to me implies is that there are either going to be future additions or expansions or you'll be able to add your own games or whatnot. But you go back and look, and the Sony, there are articles that the Sony execs have said explicitly that there are no plans to add future games to this classic console.
Yeah.
So why use that word preloaded?
Yeah, I agree with you, because that does suggest that there's a post load.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think Sony was very last minute as far as what they even wanted to do with this.
They're playing catch up with Nintendo.
Well, not only that, it's interesting that the timing of this release comes after both the C64 Mini and the Neo Geo Mini get a wide release in America. And so pretty much any competition that they have, and it also, or maybe it was, anyway, the 30th anniversary of the Genesis was either last week or just in the past couple days. And I think originally Sega was wanting to release the Genesis Mini or the Mega Drive Mini on that day, which would have made all the sense in the world. And I think Sony was kind of waiting for the rest of the competition to see how they did and how viable doing a PlayStation Classic was. I think they feel right now it's probably very viable, and I think it will be. There's still diehards that are going to buy this, but I don't. I mean,
I don't know. To me, it feels like Sony's going, "Oh shit, we have to do the same thing." They it really feels like they're just trying to play catch up. Like everybody else is doing this, we got to do one too.
Yeah, and I think they're going to. This kind of plays off of what you and I were talking about on the Q&A hangout, was that there's going to be like a divergence in console generations.
Yes.
And that with retro consoles, that's going to be its own new set of console generations. It's going to be its own industry. It's going to have its own fans. It's going to have its own thing. And then because you just don't have time to play them all.
Right.
And
because like I was saying, what I'd love to see is, them release actual, dev kits, whether they be hardware or software, for people to actually continue to develop games for those classic systems.
Yeah, I mean, and the easiest thing they could have done was make physical memory card slots on this, but have the memory card slots be where you could pop in the games and add in game packs, right? You could sell those for $50 a piece every year.
Yep.
And this little console would have, incredible longevity if they did that. But I think, my personal opinion right now is that they are going to release a PlayStation Classic 2, not a PlayStation 2 Classic, though I'm sure that'll come, but a PlayStation Classic 2, which will have, the next round of games, and will probably have the controller with the analog sticks on it.
The problem with that is I think it kind of cheapens it in a way, because you're kind of doing the same thing that has been done with the Atari Flashback consoles, which there's been
multiple of those.
There's 9.
Yeah.
There's 9. I mean, that's just excessive, and it's been overplayed. And if Sony goes that route, like I said, it just kind of seems like a cheap product. That's what those Flashback consoles are.
Yeah, I mean, unless their idea is that this is a gateway drug to the PlayStation Network, where you can play a lot of PS1 games and PS2 games and so on. Maybe that's what they're thinking. I don't know. But this is a bad move. I mean, they really fucked up. There's so many instantaneous, easy things to think of, and I cannot believe for a second that they couldn't get the rights to half those games. There's no way. If you can get Final Fantasy VII, you can get 8. Or 9 or whatever. And they know how well those are selling even on mobile platforms. It was just this is a dumb move. I don't know what the hell they're thinking as far as this goes. I will say, so I want to bring up something though, that I want to get into a future game talk at some point, but I want to give myself a little bit of credit on this, because I predicted years ago, and I might pull up the audio and use it for an episode, that we're going to get to the point where the games and the hardware are inextricably linked, as in you won't be buying games anymore. You're just going to buy the hardware that actually plays the games. And I was thinking that there would be a League of Legends PC or something like that. At the time, that's what I was referencing. And well, it looks like that's kind of happening, not in the way exactly that I imagined, but it is kind of happening where, and I'm okay with this. I'm not okay with Sony's choices. I'm not okay with the PlayStation Classic exactly, but I'm okay with this concept of where you buy the console and it comes with the games, and that's the end of the story. I sort of anticipated that this eventually has to happen, where you're going to have to custom build hardware to play these games. So anyway, just bringing that point up, but yeah, very ugly list. Again, I'm seriously debating, but I'm probably still going to get it. I'm seriously debating my pre-order of the PlayStation Classic because I don't think I'll play half of these, yeah,
it's a skip for me.
Yeah. I mean, and again, I have my PlayStation 2 where I I don't have all these games because half of them I never even fucking heard of, which that's crazy in itself. But like I have my PlayStation 2 that's modded that I can play Symphony of the Night on, and that I can play, Star Trek Invasion, the Colony Wars games. Fuck, I wish the Colony Wars games were on there. But so many things. It's a flub. Yeah. So, all right. Any other comments on that, Robin, or otherwise we can get on?
I think we've covered it pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was just a nice little break from the Star Wars talk there for a minute. But now we're going to get into the good stuff that happened in Star Wars, because it's stuff really that was made by the fans, and fans always have one thing. There's a reason that they make it in the first place, because they can't really make money off of it. They do it out of passion, and passion is where you get all the great shit in the world. And this is our fan production of the month, and it is simply a short film. It's anime called TIE Fighter. Obviously takes its cues from the game that we talked about. Was it last month when we did the breakdown of best Star Wars games, Robin?
Yep.
Yeah. And of course, both of our number ones was the classic 1994 game, Star Wars TIE Fighter. This is an anime done by,
Oda King.
Oda King. Yeah. It's obviously a reference to otaku, Oda King. And it is brilliant. It was originally like a year before a full 7-minute version came out. It was only like 20-30 seconds or something like that, and everybody's just like, holy shit, this needs to be a thing,
right?
I remember when I first saw it, and I was shitting myself. I was like, I was gonna say I
had to change my pants.
Yeah, it was amazing. And then when the full 7.5-minute version came out, fucking this is one of the best bits of Star Wars that you'll ever watch in your life. I mean, and there's no talking, like there's no vocals. It's just, there's a great soundtrack to it. They bring in the metal and everything, with some really unique beats, as well as some classic Star Wars beats, including the Imperial March. The animation looks, it's straight out of Japan, and it's the highest quality. I mean, if it's just brilliant. Oda King does great work.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, tell me about it, Robin. What do you got for this?
This is just a pure, unadulterated, love letter to the fans of TIE Fighter, like you and me. I love this. I told you before the show started that if you hadn't picked this one, I would have gotten around to it eventually.
Yeah. It's so brilliant. And like to have, and this is well before we saw it in Rebels and other, other things that Disney has done. Cause this is fairly fresh. When did this come out? A couple of years ago, I guess 2015. So 3 years ago.
Yeah. Well, like the original shorter clip was a little bit older.
Yeah.
The final clip was just from a couple of years ago.
Right. But the cool thing that was in it was you had female TIE fighter pilots.
Yes.
I thought that was so badass.
Yeah, the TIE bomber pilot.
Yeah, that sold me all the way. I'm like, oh, yeah, women are flying these things. I like that. So, yeah, the soundtrack for it is amazing. It's just really intense, and it's a bunch of TIE fighters taking out a bunch of rebels, and you get... Go ahead.
And it is like the guy who did it, it shows, he knows his shit, right down to, like, he didn't model the interior of the cockpits based on what you see in the Star Wars movies. He did it based on what was in the games from TIE Fighter and X-Wing. Right. And it's just so cool. I love that so much.
Yeah. I mean, I think he also directly lifted like the interiors of the Star Destroyers, which you get a lot of look of that. And in fact, when you watch, I watched it again before we recorded, just to remember everything. And I realized, I'm like, I want to see a lot more within Star Destroyers, for fuck's sake. Like, because I mean, these are huge ships. Like, what does all this really, really look like? And you realize how little you actually ever do see of the inside of them. And this gives you even a little preview of that. So there's so much to take away from this. There's so much beauty, and it's just so badass. And the rebels, kind of get their asses handed to them. And I enjoyed it.
Well, I think that point leads excellently into our next topic.
I agree. In fact, I was, you took my segue and ran with it, and by all means. Because our next segment is the question of the month. And the question that I posited is, what is the Star Wars TV show / cartoon you always wished would happen? And Robin, I'm going to let you open this one up. Tell me what you think.
So yeah, just going off what we were talking about, I would love to see a Star Wars TV show or cartoon from the perspective of the quote unquote bad guys.
Yes.
And I have long held like, I would love to see like, a show from the Imperial point of view. But even more than that, and I know you don't like this show, but I thought it would be really cool if they said they did a pre-Rule of Two Sith Empire story in the vein of sort of like Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
You have a lot of politicking and backstabbing and,
Yeah. I mean, so kind of the sad part here is my answer is pretty much exactly the same. we didn't even discuss this beforehand. But that was going to be, because I was going to lead to about how, I want to see inside more of the Star Destroyers. And that's exactly what it brought to mind for me. It's like, fuck, I want an Imperial show. Like, I really want an Imperial, and I want it to be where the rebels are being treated as from the perspective that they are terrorists, that,
right.
They are bringing chaos to the galaxy. This is a very real problem. I want people to experience people who talk about the Emperor as if he's this glowing figure, not the, quote unquote hideous Sidious that, that we see, that we know that he actually is at the time of the Empire. I want that so badly because we know, and you can say, well, I don't know that it would work. And you could say to Disney instantaneously, did you see how well the game TIE Fighter sold? Do you see the reputation that it has? No, you can do this. It will work. People will buy it. People will be into it. I don't know how many 501st stormtroopers you have to have march around you to realize, hey, people wouldn't mind something that has to do with the Empire, and that puts it in not so negative a light, perhaps.
Yeah. And we got like just the smallest, barely littlest taste of that in the show Star Wars Rebels with the character of what was his name? Callus. Yeah, because like every once in a while they would do cutback to, do segments from his point of view within the Empire before he defected. And I always loved those little bits. Those sort of like, used inside the behind the scenes of the Empire.
Yeah, I mean, and they kind of toyed with it, even like with Battlefield 2, with Iden Versio.
Right.
She Iden Versio, she, initially it's like, oh no, I'm from a planet where guess what? The Empire works.
Yeah.
Like, and we live in paradise. I don't know what the fuck's wrong with you people, but we're living the good life. And
that was a great book. I mean,
Inferno Squad was awesome.
Yeah. You want to talk about a huge disappointment though, was what they followed it up with was that ton of shit piece of crap game.
Yeah. Again, this. Yep. No, I know the single player, like I'm glad it was there, but like the turn, you weren't playing the Empire long enough.
Yeah. And that's the way they advertised it from the very beginning when like they announced the game, like this is going to be a game from the Empire's point of view. And I'm like, fuck yes.
Yeah.
And then they pull that shit.
Yeah, I mean, I pre-ordered that, $90 down. I got the big deluxe edition and everything. I'm like, no, this is going to be it. Finally, I get to be the Empire again. Yeah. And God damn it.
And
never again.
And I did the same thing despite getting burned on the first one that EA did, the first Battlefront. And so, fool me twice. Shame on me. I'm done.
Yeah, no, I'm never pre-ordering a Star Wars game again. Nope. Like I said, never again.
Not as long as EA has control of the franchise.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I wasn't sure what you'd come up with, but I think this is something that really a lot of people are dying for is that Imperial show. Because there is a lot of wiggle room to talk about within that. There is a way that I think you could still talk about heroic characters in that perspective, even if you think that the rebels are effectively the good guys. I think that there's, there's angles that you could take with this. I mean, we're talking about the fucking Empire, and it would be so amazing to like see characters like Tarkin again, just like we got to in Rebels, or to see Thrawn, or, I mean, in the 90s, this is the only thing I wanted. Like, I wanted an Imperial show. Right. And I thought Lucas had the guts to do it. And it seemed like actually in the early aughts that he did, because like there was the show they were going to make that was all about a young Palpatine, right?
Yep. Yeah. Underworld. Star Wars Underworld.
So he doesn't mind getting seedy. So let's get seedy, let's, oh man. Yeah. It'll probably happen at some point. I imagine it's going to happen. it's
yeah,
reminiscent.
so.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it will. I'm not. I don't know if I'm as hopeful on this point as you are, but yeah, it would be nice.
Yeah,
it would make my day.
Yeah, I think that there's some trepidation around so I had heard stories at conventions back in the late 90s that, well, first off, there were the rumors, which ended up being true because Rick McCallum really was working on it, that there was going to be a Star Wars live action TV show back in the day. But there were rumors that literally George Lucas was waiting to see, because at the time of episode 1, the hottest thing going in science fiction was Star Trek. Like, just by and large, you had the Next Generation, you had DS9, Voyager, you had this huge universe going on. And obviously he wouldn't minded a cut of that. And they were talking about at the time. So Rick Berman, not Rick McCallum, but Rick Berman was saying, okay, we're going to do a Klingon TV show. That never took off, where it was going to be Klingon. And the theory was that the reason they didn't want to do a Klingon TV show is because nobody would be able to relate to the Klingons. Like, people that, the humans of Earth, us watching it today, would not be able to relate to watching Klingons do their thing. And the rumor was that at least Rick McCallum was kind of waiting to see how that Klingon show would do. And since it never came into fruition, like a lot of things, didn't end up being tried or happen. And, Lucas also isn't afraid of this stuff. Like, remember, he was going to end Return of the Jedi with Luke Skywalker putting on Vader's mask.
Yep.
I mean, like, he's willing to go dark. And obviously what we were talking about earlier with that theory with the midichlorians and the wills, that's pretty dark, like that's some fucked up shit in a very real way. I mean, like, there's almost a rape aspect to that.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know if Disney will do it, but
yeah, I don't think that they will. And it kind of goes back to something we were talking about before is that people are aware that Disney, to a certain degree, is profiting off of fascism to a certain degree.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's fascism light with imagery, no philosophy.
And I don't think they really want to be seen doing more of that.
That's a great point.
At least not right now.
You raise a really great point. Like, with our political climate, I could see where, like, you think an easy way to fix the Star Wars game problem right now would be to remaster TIE Fighter, but that could be seen as a problem.
Yeah.
And considering that fascism is a very real thing, literally marching the streets of America. Or in my opinion anyway. So yeah. Okay. All right. That makes sense. That's probably not going to happen anytime soon. Well, God damn it.
But like I said, my other suggestion is it doesn't necessarily even have to be, in the time of the Empire. They could do a lot of people have been asking for an Old Republic based, story to be told in some form, whether, animation or television or something. And I definitely do think they could do something with, the pre-Rule of Two Sith. I think that would be so cool.
Yeah, I think they have that. I think at least Filoni has that in mind. That's why he laced so much of like Moraband or whatever in Rebels and so on. That I think that's the other kind of, I don't want to say easy choice is a derogative. No, it's a great choice, is let's get an Old Republic, really like Knights of the Old Republic style show. Or even Tales of the Jedi, like we were talking about at the beginning of the show. That would be another one that I would really love to see. Get into the history, the real history.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I think that's we've gone 2 hours and a little bit of change here, I think. So I think that we can wrap this baby up. But great conversation. Great conversations throughout the whole damn thing. Went in areas I did not expect. So, but as I like to ask in every Star Wars update, I mean, me personally, I'm feeling pretty good about Star Wars right now. I mean, the Vader comic is phenomenal. The Mandalorian's looking pretty good. I'm enjoying Resistance. We have Clone Wars, a final little round of that coming up very soon. Overall, I'm feeling pretty confident about things. How about you, Rob?
Yeah, me too. I see a lot of potential. And what's coming in the future. So I'm kind of like, I am to a certain degree trying to manage my expectations, especially like with episode 9. More than anything.
Yeah.
But I see good things for Star Wars in the future.
Absolutely. So anyway, we'll wrap this one up. Of course, there's still more to come out in October, even though this is Devil's Night, baby. There's still more to come in October. We'll wrap it up there. So, Robin, as always, thank you, man. And we will see all of you on the other side.